Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting edition of the Gamble Rebel. And I say exciting because we have the legend, the man, the myth, back himself for what is technically the fourth time, although it's the third interview. We did an interview before, and then a second part that went so long we split that into two parts. So this will be the fourth appearance, and the second interview with the legendary Mr. Binky Phillips.
You know, my bathroom mirror does agree with you as far as being a legend is concerned.
Well, I tell you, man, honestly, like I'm not again not blowing smoke up your ass to use my favorite phrase, but it's astounding the level of feedback I've gotten.
Oh,
Your
it was really
interviews pushed me into helped push me into monetization into enough hours viewed that the channel started to make a little bit of
oh,
money. Not a lot,
thank
but
you.
grocery money. So thank
Oh,
you. And
honey, I'm
that's
glad. That's great. My honor.
oh, it's great. You're I have a couple hundred between shorts and things, a couple hundred videos. Your three installments are all in the top 10 of the most viewed. And then
Like,
the first segment of the first interview we did is in the top 5 of all my videos ever viewed. And I got to tell you, it's funny because I'm getting messages from KISS people in these larger KISS YouTube channels that have millions of viewers. And they're
right.
asking me, how did you get Binky Phillips? Not how did you get Binky Phillips? How did you get Binky Phillips? Like you're a
Interesting.
unicorn, as I've called you in the past amongst Kiss
That's
fans, right?
yeah.
You know,
I had no idea.
no, it's
That's
true, and I appreciate. I'm glad that I was able to tell you that. I appreciate you
yeah.
giving me
No,
your time.
it's amusing. It's kind of cute. I they were personal friends. Um, in fact, last week, an old friend of mine bumped into Gene and said, we have a mutual friend in Binky Phillips." And Gene went, "Oh my God, he's such a great guitar player. And the Planets was such a cool band name. How's he doing?" And my friend said, "Oh, Binky's fine." And my friend said, Gene seemed relieved. I guess maybe he thought I was homeless. I don't know.
I think that's great, though. That speaks to the fact that you had a good relationship with those guys, and
Yeah, no,
you're a good guy, right?
yeah, it was like 4 or 5 days ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
Uh,
very cool. So it's
yeah,
funny. A lot has happened since last time we talked. With timing that necessarily it's never good timing, but odd timing. In the last installment, we talked about your guitar collection and focused on your 59 Les Paul, which had been previously owned by the legendary Rick Derringer. And then a
yeah,
couple days after we aired that, unfortunately, Rick had passed away. And
yeah.
so my
He-
condolences. I know that knew him through musician circles. So sorry for the
yeah,
loss of someone that you.
yeah. I didn't know him when he sold me the guitar. He sold me the guitar through an intermediary, the guy who owned Guitar Lab, a guy named Carl Thompson. But after he sold me the guitar, I got to know him. We bumped into each other a few times, and there was a documentary on Les Paul called "The Wizard of Waukesha," which is the name of I think the town he grew up in, and the people making the documentary needed a rock star to like give the rock star perspective on Les Paul, and I knew these people who were doing the documentary, and I said, I think I can get you Rick Derringer, and they both like, they like went, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And long story short, I wound up in Rick Derringer's living room interviewing him for the film. And
Amazing.
I certainly would never say that he and I were friends, but he was uh, utterly down to earth, just a totally cool guy,
Yeah,
totally mellow, very very smart, wise, better than smart. He was wise, and
yeah,
just a killer player, killer player. He could
yeah,
he
for
could
sure.
he could wipe the floor with about three-quarters of us.
Yeah, he
And
was.
what we
He had a definite and a great sound. Of course, that Les Paul, of course, was probably part of it. But I mean, he could make anything sound good. It
no,
seemed.
that one of the things that Rick told me was that the guitar I own is the only guitar on Johnny Winter and live, and it's one of two guitars on Johnny Winter and studio album.
Oh wow!
So, and also he never told me which tracks, but he said that
Yeah,
my guitar was on about three or four white trash songs.
that's amazing. I'm sure
So
it was his go-to. It's such a great sounding guitar, right?
well, they all are. I mean, it, it's it's a myth that um, is just dead true. It's not. There's no exaggeration whatsoever. Those guitars are the best electric guitars ever made.
Yeah,
It just is. So
yeah.
uh,
I mean, it's funny because it's we touched on that again. Like the Kiss stuff got huge response, but the Who stories also got huge response. As we are saying, the Rick Derringer stuff and the guitar stuff. It's just amazing. Like I've had, I initially I focused on Kiss stuff in the first interview because I knew the
right,
Kiss nerds like myself would be thirsty for it. However, people have been coming at me from all angles of all the things we've talked about, and
right,
it's like I don't know if you realize this, but you're a respected and known name. Again, no, not blowing smoke up your ass, but people are like, wow, no one's ever heard this Binky talk this much about these things. So it's really, really great to have you here. And one of the things
well,
we touched on, and you and I have talked
thanks
about
for having me.
privately, was we did touch on it a little bit in the previous episodes. We're going to kind of focus on it today. Was your relationship as a fan and fellow musician with the New York Dolls in that
Sure,
scene? So,
sure.
do you mind me asking you first off? Can you recall the very first time you ever heard of or saw a picture of, wherever it may be, the New York Dolls?
This is a fun story. Um, there was a guy named Johnny Gonzalez, and I met him at a Led Zeppelin concert in Central Park in 1969. Again, I wouldn't call us friends at that point. Later, we did become friends, but we were acquaintances. We would see each other at the Fillmore East and various shows, and always like sort of give each other like, "Hey, how you doing?" Um, so, cut to the late spring of no, actually, it was around, yeah, right around now. Actually, it was the early summer, 1972, and I was on 48th Street, which was Music Row. It was where all the guitar shops were. And my old friend Peter Jordan, who I'd also met in 1969, walked into the store that I was hanging out in, and I hadn't seen Peter a few months, and we sort of were catching up. And Peter said, you need to do something. I'm working with this band called the New York Dolls, and you really got to come down and see them. They play every Tuesday night at the Mercer Arts Center. I really think you would dig them. And I said, well, two things. One, I've seen an ad for them in the Village Voice, so I know what you're talking about. And two, that's the fucking coolest band name I've ever heard. I said,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
such a great name. Oh my god! So I go home and my phone rings, and it's a guy named John Alusik, rest in peace, who was a music maven. The guy was like an Anglophile, hardcore Anglophile. He idolized the Small Faces. Steve Marriott was his life's hero, and John calls me up and he goes, "Hey, you know this band, the New York Dolls, everyone's talking about?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I just bumped into Peter Jordan today. He's roadieing for them." And he says, I went and saw them last week. Binky, you gotta come with me. They suck. You won't fucking believe this shit. It's such a stupid fucking hype. But that's how my friend John talked. He was very
yeah,
thuggy.
yeah. But
It was very street. And he said, he says, we're gonna go. I'm gonna buy a fucking basket of fucking rotten tomatoes. I'm gonna fucking hurl these motherfuckers. He was furious. He was like,
yeah, yeah.
he was pissed off.
Offended.
So so in the same day, I had one friend go, "You got to see these guys. You're going to love them." And 4 or 5 hours later, another friend going,
Yeah.
"Oh man, this is the worst piece of shit ever." Anyway, so it was decided that my band, the Planets, because we existed by that point, that all four guys in the Planets would bring their girlfriends, and we'd go to Mercer Art Center to see what this was all about. And We got there around 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, and at 1:30, they still hadn't showed up. I mean, it was just like
The
so. And
original Guns N' Roses.
every 5 minutes, we just got more and more angry, and we were going to hate them so much. Oh, I can't wait to hate them.
Yeah.
And there was a commotion at the door, and these like weird ragamuffin, like fucking alien motherfuckers walk into the room. Like, they didn't have like they never changed into stage clothes.
Yeah.
Okay, that
Yeah.
never happened. They were wearing stage clothes. That was, you know what I'm
That
saying?
was them. Yeah.
And and they get on stage and they turn on the lights, and oh my god, that guy Johnny Ginzali is in this band. Holy fuck! Look at this. The doll. He's in the Johnny's in the Dolls.
Yeah.
And someone said, yeah, he calls himself Johnny Thunders now. And I went, oh, I've heard of that. Okay, oh, he's Johnny Thunders. Johnny Ginzali is Johnny Thunders. Anyway, I halfway loved them before they fucking played a note.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just they were so charismatic. I mean, it was like each guy had such a clearly defined persona. And
Mhm.
the clothes, really, they were like wild. They were a decade ahead of everybody. And they had this this like weird lackadaisical attitude. Like they got up on stage and they didn't start playing. They started talking to each other.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, some one of them was like, going, "Oh, I saw Bobby last night." You know what he said? I mean, they're just talking to each other, and like we're watching. Anyway, they finally start, and they opened with "Bad Girl,"
Yeah.
and by the time they hit the second chorus, they were my second favorite band after the Who. I mean, they slammed me. They the dolls were a granite boulder landing on my fucking head. It was
Yeah.
the most intense. You got to understand, this was in 1972. You had King Crimson, Yes, Pink Floyd, Genesis. The Who were doing fucking operas, and so it was like there was no danger. Everybody was, 10-minute drum solos. I mean, solos. The lyrics about doom and gloom, and I mean, it's like I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan, but like their lyrics started getting really cheesy. So the Dolls, it was like I didn't know this was what I wanted. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like tasting something new. You never knew you liked it
Yeah,
till you
and
tried it, right?
as soon as I saw this, as soon as I experienced this, and it went right through the set. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never got bored. I never like went, okay, enough of this. It was like I was riveted. It was life changing. It changed the way I was like I remembered. It was like it put me back in touch with the rock and roll that I loved, the rock and roll that your parents hated, the rock and roll that was
Yeah.
dangerous, the rock and roll where where the drummer throws TVs out the fucking window. I
Yeah.
mean, that was where the guitar player smashes his guitar or sets it on fire, or
Yeah.
plays with his
Yeah.
teeth. That's that glamour, which had been there as recently as 1967. By 1972, that shit was gone. It was gone.
Sure.
Everyone, bands were very serious. Oh yes,
Yeah.
and
And the
they were
Eagles and Steels and Crofts and
yeah,
that
they
kind
were,
of acoustic stuff too, right?
yeah, and they were playing in 7/4. I mean, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's just a bunch of shit, and here the Dolls going,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah. So I, what happened was, the Dolls were, uh, when I saw them that first time, there was about 60 people in Mercer Arts Theater.
Yeah.
Um, Within 3 or 4 months, you kind of couldn't get in. You'd have to show up, even though you knew they weren't going on until like a quarter to 2 in the morning. You had to
Sure.
show up at 11 to get a seat, and then you sat there for 2.5 hours just going,
Yeah.
ah.
But at least you got in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, but that's the thing. It was like they were really catching on fast.
Can I
And
ask you, Binky? They now this is a question about what you're saying. There were different rooms in the Mercer Arts Center, right? Now, did they start off in like the Oscar Wilde room and then build up
Yeah,
to a bigger room, or what? I don't know the rooms, but
right.
could you tell us about that, please?
All right, I'm. This you touched a nerve here because after all these decades, I'm still not sure which room was which, but I
Yeah,
believe
but there were other rooms.
The Oscar Wilde room was small, and that's where the dolls first started. And they got enough people into the Oscar Wilde room that they moved them to the biggest theater, which was called, I think, O'Casey. I think it was
Something
O'Casey.
like that. I'll look
Anyway,
it up and I'll
yeah,
put it here.
if I'm, like I said, it's just one of those things that I've never ever locked in exactly which room was
Yeah.
which, but there was a total of 5 rooms,
Okay.
and the first time I saw the dolls, which was August 1st, 1972, um, that was the largest room. And what had happened in New York, they were starting to play other places. They were playing Coventry out in Queens. They were playing Kenny's Castaways. And it became very obvious that the only gig in town, the only gig in New York, was opening for the Dolls. If you weren't opening for the Dolls, number one, you couldn't find a place to play that would have you doing original material. And number two, if you did find a place, nobody came. But if you opened for the Dolls, you had a guaranteed audience. Like you had, I mean, you had at least 50 or 60 people, the early scragglers who come in, you'd have 50 or 60 people. Anyway, so the Planets, my band, we realized this. We realized that we had to put all our energy and focus into somehow getting a Dolls opening slot. And our singer at the time, a guy named John Taylor, was a world class schmoozer. And I mean, like, the guy could talk the birds out of the trees, as they say. It's just he was super smooth, super articulate, super smart. And one night he wound up sitting next to David Johansen at the big table in the back room of Max's. I never bothered with the back room of Max's because there was so what's the word? It,
Beaky.
it was so cliquish. It
Yeah,
was like,
exclusive and
yeah, and if you didn't belong, they were like sneered. I didn't care enough. I didn't need to know those people. I mean, Johnny Thunders was my fucking friend, so I didn't need these fucking hangers on. I didn't
yeah.
need to know, some Joe Blow asshole who played in some other band. Anyway, John is sitting next to David Johansen and convinces David Joe to come to a Planets rehearsal. And this is like right after Thanksgiving, 1972. And David comes and he brings Jerry, the new drummer, who hasn't done a Dolls gig yet.
Yeah.
Uh,
After
and
Billy tragically
yeah,
passed
yeah,
away in
yeah,
England. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
the
terrible,
whole
terrible, just terrible,
heartbreaking story.
terrible. Um, anyway,
We brought him to see you. Yeah,
so the two of them come to our rehearsal place, and we play like 5 songs. And David Johansen says, "I've heard enough. Come on down and throw your hat in the ring."
I love that.
That's verbatim. That's what he said. And
He had a
and
turn of a phrase, that's for sure.
oh,
That man did.
he was a world class wit.
Yeah.
Fucking, he was a hilarious guy. Very super fucking smart.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so the next gig turned out to be December 19th, 1972, and it was going to be Jerry Nolan's debut gig as the drummer of the Dolls, and we were the opening act. And then about a week before the gig, it turned out that that Paul Nelson, the A&R guy at Mercury Records, who wanted to sign the Dolls, was able to convince the Suits to come down to Mercer Arts to see them. So not only was it Jerry's first gig, but it was the gig where the Dolls got signed, because
Wow.
the Suits, um, these guys were smart enough to know this. We don't get this at all.
Yeah.
This is completely fucking alien.
Yeah.
It must be something, that, and that's the thing. Record company guys. There were two kinds of record company guys. There were the guys that went, "This is weird. I'm not touching it," and there were the
Yeah,
guys going, "This is weird. Might happen."
yeah,
Were the chance takers, and Paul Nelson was the chance taker, but he got. I can remember it was three guys, and they really were in fucking dark suits with white shirts and ties.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I was 19, and these guys were in their 30s, so they might as well have been grandfathers,
Yeah, you
and
thought it was the IRS
they
or something,
stuck,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
they stuck out in the audience. They looked ridiculous.
yeah.
Anyway, so it, we went down really well, which was a great surprise because uh, bands that opened for the Dolls didn't always go down well. Everyone was there for the Dolls. They didn't give a fuck about you. So the fact that we went down well was really exciting. And then the other fact that was really cool was that the Dolls flipped. They fucking flipped. Johnny and Syl in particular, like completely flipped for the band and my guitar playing. In fact, Johnny, I had my first Dolls album and I took it to Max's to have the guys sign it, and breaks my heart because I don't have it. Somebody stole it from me. But Johnny wrote to my favorite guitarist in the USA,
That's
which was,
amazing.
yeah, it was great. And I know that sounds like I'm blowing my horn, but fuck it.
No,
Uh,
no, you're telling the truth. You're telling the story. I appreciate
this,
that.
this is this is connected in as much as Walter Lure, as you know, was the guitar player Johnny Thunders played with right after the Dolls.
Yeah, the
And
Heartbreakers. Yeah.
I was in CBGB's one night in December '78, and Walter was back from London where the Heartbreakers were living, and I didn't know that he was in town. And we had a big reunion. Hey, what are you doing here? When did you get back? How long are you staying? Are you seeing this band? Whatever. And Walter goes, "Oh, there's somebody I want you to meet." We walked back down to the end of the bar, and the bar like had a little turn, and there were two stools in this little alcove, and it was like this little private area. Anyway, so he walks me back to the thing, and there's a guy sitting with
Mhm.
his coat like this,
Kilroy.
and bright red hair, and
Yeah.
his hair and a big camel hair coat up there. All you could see was his eyes. And Walter says, "John, I want you to meet my friend Binky Phillips. He's the best guitarist in New York." Now, I didn't say that. Walter said that. All right. And I never knew Walter felt that way about me. I mean, Walter and I were mutual fans, but anyway, so I put my hand out and the guy pulls the coat down and it's fucking Johnny Rotten.
Oh
And
wow.
and I stick out my hand and he shakes my hand, and as I'm shaking his hand, I go, "Oh man, I fucking love your band." And
Mm.
he goes, "Oh yeah, well I fucking hate him." And I was like, and I went like what? Huh? And Johnny and Walter sort of looks at me and like rolls his eyes like, don't bother. It's not worth bothering. So I just went, well, okay. Sorry that I like your band. My apologies. Anyway,
Uh,
the timing is absolutely cosmic. The night before, he quit the band on stage at the Cow Palace in San Francisco.
San Francisco. That was the next. Wow.
So
Because I do know that he went to.
he flew to New York. He flew to New York, and he's at
He
CBG.
called Joe. They left him there. If I may interrupt you, it's part of the story. The band left him and went to South America to do the great
Right,
train
right,
robbery
right.
bullshit film thing they did. He had to call Warner Brothers because they left him with no money and left him stranded in San Francisco. And they flew him to New York, as you say, the next day. That's
Yeah.
amazing, Binky. That's history.
So, well, but the thing, so here I am telling him that I love his band the day after he's quit. It's like, what an
You couldn't have
asshole.
known.
You know, here's something that's very cool. I'm proud of this.
Yeah.
The guy at Warner Brothers, the vice president of A&R that wanted to sign my band, The Planets, was the guy that signed the Sex Pistols to Warner Brothers.
Yeah. That is cool.
Yeah, that's
Now,
cool.
I want to ask you, Biggie, while we're on the topic of two things, while we're still talking about Johnny Thunders and we're also talking about Walter Lure, I want to let people at home know I only found this out myself recently. Binky and Walter Lure, which we'll get to this, had a project later on in the
Yeah.
90s, I believe,
No,
together.
no, it's 2011 to 2014.
Okay, now we will get to that. But I want to backpedal just for 1 second, if I may ask you.
Sure, sure.
The Johnny Gonzalez that you knew, Gonzalez, was it?
Uh,
Gonzalez?
Ginzali.
Ginzale, pardon me. Johnny Ginzale.
Yeah.
I've seen the Stones movie. I don't know if it's Cocksucker Blues or the Maisel
Yeah.
Brothers film where he's in the audience
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
you're there too, I believe, at the Stones
Yeah.
concert.
I'm about 20 feet in front of him.
Now he's in a shot, and he had a charisma even then. So my
Yeah.
question to you
I'm,
is,
I'm in
when
that
he was
same
that
shot.
person, was he that charismatic before
Yeah.
he
No.
became Johnny Thunders?
The first time I ever saw him was like I said, this Led Zeppelin concert in
Yeah,
Central Park, and my eyes were riveted. He had a girlfriend named Janice, whose last name I can never pronounce, so I'm not going to. But it was an exotic European name, and Johnny was sort of Janice's Ken doll. She dressed Johnny. So when when the world looks at the New York Dolls and the way Johnny looks and the way other guys in the band look, um, redheaded Janice, that's what we all called her. Redheaded Janice is responsible for about
yeah,
75% of their look. She was so ahead of her time. And he
yeah.
and Johnny already had that hair. I mean,
And,
it wasn't as outrageous as when in the Dolls, but he had really long,
yeah,
crazy hair, and his hairdo was like British rock star exaggerated,
yeah, yeah,
the cartoon version of British rock star, and he was dripping, he had like chaps on,
yeah.
with like a toy gun, and a little Boy Scouts of America shirt that
Yeah,
like
yeah, nodded at the stomach. Yeah, I've heard about this.
just I mean it was like and you know right now in 2025 that look would make you like maybe go oh, check this guy out, whatever. But
Yeah,
in 1969, he might as well have been from fucking Jupiter. I mean, it was like he was so unique, and he
yeah,
always looked like that. I saw him probably 5 or 6 times before I discovered he was in the Dolls, and every time I saw him, he was decked out, just decked. It's important to note that Sylvain was an actual fashion designer.
yeah.
That I mean, he had
I've
a
read
clothes.
Sylvain's book. It's a great book, by the way.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt you,
oh,
but
oh,
yeah,
I need to read that. He was such a sweet kid. He wasn't a kid. He was older than me, but yeah,
yeah,
that was what I just slipped and said that. But
yeah,
that's kind of he was like a kid.
yeah,
He was like it had the like enthusiasm of a 16-year-old. Just
sure.
anyway, he didn't need Johnny to dress him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Okay, so they were
so
like minded. It's interesting to me. You were there in the thick of it even before it began. This whole doll thing, and you could sense that Johnny had that something. It's funny to me because you see the Dolls' influence later on in the '80s on other bands and stuff. But
uh,
even I
all
look
the
at
hair.
Aerosmith. I believe that Aerosmith used the pattern that the Dolls used. The tall blonde bass player with the long shaggy blonde hair, the androgynous singer with the big lips, which of course goes back to the Stones. But you know what I'm trying to say.
No,
Joe
no,
Perry would very much rip the page from Johnny Thunder's book. The tight
they
rhythm section, like I mean, to me,
You're nailing it, dude. You're nailing it. It is a fact. It's not a legend or a myth. It's a
mm,
fact that Aerosmith idolized the Dolls.
yeah,
Every band guy that went and saw the Dolls completely lost their shit over them, and it was so weird because they weren't great. I mean, the Dolls were not great
yeah,
musicians. I mean, they really weren't. They kind of were rudimentary. I mean, Johnny knew like four licks.
yeah,
And yet, like a guy like me who could play like Townsend and Jimmy Page,
yeah.
you know, I'm idolizing this Johnny Thunders guy who, I mean, I show every now and then I would show him a lick, and all of a sudden it would be like, and then I'd hear him do it on stage. It'd be like, Johnny's got 5 licks, not 4. He's got 5. there was a funny
Right.
there was one of my fondest memories about those guys. God, it makes me misty eyed. John and I we're on the dressing room floor of Max's Kansas City, which is the third floor of the building, and John and I go walk down to the end of the hall to smoke a joint. And I don't know why we weren't sharing it, but because there was just the two of us smoking, and it was like it was like a walk-in closet. It was a really small, like an alcove or something. And John had walked down the hall and smoked a joint with me while he had his guitar on. So I said, "Let me see that thing." And I'm just fucking around. I'm playing blues licks and whatever. Anyway, not realizing what I was doing, not realizing what kind of reaction I was going to get, I did the intro to "Long Cool Woman" by the Hollies.
Yeah.
And Johnny lost his shit. He like went, "Holy shit, do that again. Oh, oh, fuck. I'll be right back." And about a minute later, he comes with David Johansen, Sylvain, Jerry, and Peter Jordan. And they're all standing like clustered around this little alcove. And Johnny goes, "Do it, do it, do it." So I and everybody, all of them, like go, "Holy shit!" They're all like, they go, "Do it again." They made me do it like 4 times.
I
It was
love it. I love it.
such a sweet moment. It was so, and it was so cute how they were like mind blown. Like, how on earth do you know how to play that? And it
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
not that hard. It's not, I mean, it's not super tricky. I mean, um, we had a deal with Warner Brothers. The Planets were signed to Warner Brothers. The Bob Regier, the A&R guy that signed the Pistols, was signing us, and everything we had the studio booked in London Ramport Studios. The Who we were going to record the album in the Who's studio, and
Amazing.
John Alcock was going to produce, and he had just done The Boys Are Back in Town, which was a
Yep, yep, yep.
global hit. Everything was set up. Everything was ready to go. And Ted Templeman comes back from a month's vacation. He had just finished the first album, which was a lot of work. The first album was a ton of work because
Yeah.
these guys they'd never been in the studio. They were
Getting
super.
the vocals out of Roth. Yeah.
Yeah. Roth couldn't stay on key to save his life.
Yeah.
But he did eventually because you can hear it on the album. But my point is that Templeman was drained. He was like he took a month off. He went to Hawaii or some shit, and he comes back, and somebody plays him our demo and says, Bob Regier, your VP friend down the hall is signing this band, and Ted goes to Mo Austin, the chairman, and says, "I have the guitar band. Okay. I don't want any other motherfucking guitar bands on Warner Brothers right now. In a few years, you can sign another, but right now, mine is the only one. I've got the guitar. I don't want this band on the label."
Yeah.
And
Oh, Jesus.
well, you know what? Um, he made the right move. I mean, Mo Austin made the. I mean, I had a great band and we had tons of potential, but I remember hearing, when I was working in a record store and a promo of the first Van Halen album comes in, and I went like, my face burst into flames. It was like, these are the guys that cost me the fucking gig, my
Yeah, Jesus.
and I put the album on, and and by eruption I was a fan.
Yeah, yeah,
It was just like it was like these guys fucked me over. I mean, they didn't, but Ted, their producer, fucked me over. One of the worst fuckings over that I ever got. I
that's a
mean,
big one.
and so what I take from this, the way I'm able to, the solace that I give myself is Ted Templeman thought my guitar playing was good enough to maybe get into Eddie's way.
Yeah, that's a pretty big compliment.
I mean, yeah, it's like it's like if I'm going to get blown out, it might as well be Eddie Van Halen. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
true, right? That's true.
like okay, you win. It's like
And Ted he was also a vice president of Warner Brothers.
no,
I
I'm
don't know if you're
saying
aware of that. Yeah,
no,
I read his biography recently.
Ted,
He
Ted,
was a vice president as well as A&R and a staff
yeah.
producer.
Well, he was just Bob Regier and Ted Templeman were equals in as much as they both had, their title was vice president of A&R. I don't think Bob Regier was a studio animal. The difference was that besides being an A&R guy, Ted could go into the studio and record a band.
That's right. With he did like
So
a lot of classic
Yeah,
records.
Ted,
Doobie
Ted was
Brothers and
Ted was super important to and the thing is that Bob Regier, this was another element in the story. Bob Regier signed the Sex Pistols, Laurie Anderson, Ricky Lee Jones. You see where I'm going? He signed the weird shit.
yeah.
But he
Well,
signed
to
the
this
like.
day, Rotten speaks very fondly of him. In his book, he talks about him with nothing but respect and love, and he doesn't give anyone any respect and love. You know what I mean? He hates his own fucking band. So
But anyway, that was Ted knew how to craft stuff that could go platinum. Bob Regier didn't give a fuck about platinum. He went after artists, And I mean, the one thing, if you look at Ricky Lee Jones and Laurie Anderson and Sex Pistols, they're all drastically different from each other, like wildly different from each other. But there's a continuity. They're all oddballs. They're all they're their own category. There wasn't a Ricky Lee Jones style singer before Ricky Lee Jones. There certainly wasn't a Pistols before the Pistols, and Laurie Anderson is in her own world. I mean, she's
that's
like
right.
so. And
Well, they had
anyway,
that quirk factor, as you called it, quirk. We
yeah, yeah,
discussed that last interview, right?
yeah. That
Yeah.
was um, the quirk factor was a really important issue at CBGBs and Maxes back when the Planets first started gigging in New York. We were a glam band. We were New York Dolls wannabes. With satin, velvet, high heeled boots, eye makeup. In fact, you've seen the pictures of Kiss they've got like feminine makeup on and they look completely ridiculous.
Okay,
But
football players and
yeah,
tutus.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the reason that photo, in a nutshell, that photo lets you know how much Kiss loved the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
I mean, Kiss wanted to be the New York Dolls. That's why they fucking dress up. That's why Ace had a woman's hat on in that fucking picture. I mean, they were trying to be the Dolls,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everybody was, all of us, every fucking. I didn't sound. My band sounded like the Who, but visually, we looked just like the Dolls.
Now, can I ask you, Bicky? Now, like the famous "Throw Your Hat in the Ring" show, the first time you played with the Dolls, if we could take it back to that. So, did you guys have a similar look to them then, or was like you just looked like an ordinary rock and roll band, but then you saw the Dolls and it started to slowly change, image
We
wise? I mean,
the the planets had the regulation British rock star look.
Granny
The
takes a trip, clothes and things like that, right?
yeah, yeah. Granny takes a trip, exactly, and Mr. Fish, and so we had, I mean, like a typical uh, stage uniform for me would be gunmetal gray satin pants,
Mm.
uh, my Anello and David Mary Jane shoes, just like Mark Bolan, bright red T strap, uh, a a T-shirt that said the planets in airbrushing that I got at a hot rod show, and over that
Right.
a sweater completely covered in pearl sequins. That would be how I'd go. That would be my
Yeah.
stage outfit. So, and it wasn't that had nothing to do with the Dolls.
Yeah.
That was me being a British rock star. The
They got it.
Dolls were something else. The Dolls the Dolls brought a trashy element into it. Um, you know, they're like, you know, people say, you know, that Richard Hell invented the torn T-shirt, but you know, Arthur, the bass player in the New York Dolls, would come on with tights on that were like completely like gaping with holes. By the third or fourth time, maybe yeah, by the third or fourth time we played CBGBs, I realized that my gunmetal gray satin pants were ridiculous. That like that this shit that shit was over. You
So
know,
and it had moved on, kind of thing. You'd grown out
yeah,
of it.
it was like, you know, I mean, television looked like Messenger Boys.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And the Ramones were a cartoon. They were a brilliant cartoon. I mean, torn jeans, white T-shirt, motorcycle jacket, torn up sneakers. I mean,
yeah,
it was they all had that. I mean, it was like a uniform, like the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. It
yeah,
was fantastic. But it was that it had nothing to do with glam. You
yeah,
know what I'm
yeah.
saying? I mean, it was raunchy. It was you know it was. Uh,
Do you feel that it was a response to glam, if I may ask you? Like, do you feel that, like, I think these things go in
yeah,
cycles.
yeah.
Glam went so far that people started going the opposite way,
I
dressing
think
down.
I think that the reaction, as I said, was not so much about fashion, but about being bored with prog rock.
Yeah, it was just too
It
much of
was
everything.
just and you know the fashion had a lot was also a way to thumb nose at uh at the prog guys because most of them did not have any fashion sense.
Yeah,
Or they had very minimal. Like I was a very big Pink Floyd fan for several years, um, and I remember you would go to see them, and all four of them would have black boots with 2-inch heels, black jeans, tight black T-shirt.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Uniform was good.
all of it. Yeah, absolutely. Now the uniformity was cool, but that stripped down. I mean, you know, it's boring. I
Yeah,
mean, you know, you see, you go, oh, look, they're all wearing black, and then you like go, you know, where's the sequins? Where's when are they going to set the guitar on fire?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think the fashion came second, but it was really the music that people
Yeah.
were bored with more than the the look. I think.
Well, we've touched on this before because I think that I put forth the supposition that I believe the planets were popular with the CBGB's crowd because musically you were a bridge between bands that could really play and the energy of punk. And that's why the CBGB audience loved you. You could deliver actual good musical performances, but with the conviction and energy of a punk band. I think that's accurate to say, Do you believe that's
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. The first time that I heard "New Rose" by the Damned,
Yeah.
I said to myself, "Holy shit, they sound just like the Planets." That I
Nice.
mean, that's I mean, our songs that tempo. I
Yeah.
mean, for the Planets, a ballad was.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't do slow songs, you know, we just didn't. And oh man, it's, those were great days.
Yeah. I know
It,
that's great. I mean, I'm focusing in on this era where rock and roll is changing. As you said, it's interesting to me. Not only you were in the thick of it, but you lasted through it and persevered, and maintained popularity. So in '72 or so, when we get back to where you played with the Dolls for the first time, you've got California soft rock, you've got prog rock, blah 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 blah, and then the Dolls come in like a hurricane, and you guys, alter these changes into '70s arena rock and onward to CBGBs and new wave punk. You guys had maintained, you stuck together, first of all, and you maintained an
yeah,
audience. Like, to me, that's very noteworthy. Who else did that in those days, if you think about it, with all those changes? But there was something in you guys that people responded to. And I think that, that's why your legacy has lasted. True music fans know who the planets are. When you talk to people that love rock and roll, they
If
know.
you say so.
No,
Okay.
I
No,
believe that. Again, I
I would,
don't blow
I
smoke up
love
anyone's
it.
ass. That's
If
why
you,
I'm thrilled to
right,
have you
I
here
love it.
because you are a link in the chain to me, the link in the chain of the music that I love. You
I
know.
got
Okay, Binky, while I have you, could you tell us quickly the story about you taking Paul Stanley to see the Ramones at CBGB? I love this story. Could you tell people at home, please?
Paul was a star at this point. Yeah, as you know, as chronology, you know that the Kiss was not a CBGB band; they were a national band by the time CBGBs happened. So he was on the road constantly. I mean, he would call me and go, "I'm in town for 2 days." I mean, it would be like, okay, let's have dinner anyway. So Paul and Gene were both kind of defensive about CBGBs. Like it was like like bands like Television that looked like I said like Messenger Boys. They didn't get it. They were like, I don't this. I'm not happy with this. This is not cool. Rock and roll turning into like Messenger Boys is bullshit. So they were very anti and as guys in a band that where like you had a hot lead guitarist and big ballsy bass and drums. They didn't understand the rawness of which is kind of interesting now that I think of it, because they were huge Dolls fans, and the Dolls were really raw and
True
rooted.
enough.
But at any rate, they thought CBGBs was kind of bullshit. But Gene not so much, but Paul definitely. And he one night he just went off like how what crap the Ramones were. And I said, it's funny that you should say that because they're playing tonight at CBGB's, or maybe it was tomorrow. Might have been they're playing tomorrow. Anyway, um, I'm taking you to CBGB's. You're going to see this. You need to see them live before you fucking decide what this. And Paul goes, all right. Anyway, so it was a fun thing to walk into CBGB's with a member of Kiss, and he had all the hair and everything.
Yeah.
He didn't look like no one looked like him. Uh, and very few people. I don't know. I'm trying to remember if even one person recognized him. He once told me. He said, "You know why I have this just one star on the eye?" He said, "I wanted to be recognized."
Yeah, yeah. He did look the most like himself,
Yeah,
even with
yeah.
the makeup
And
on.
he
That's
said,
true.
I absolutely wanted to be recognized. Anyway, so we get there. The place is packed. This is. I was like, it might have literally been the last time they ever played CBGBs. They were huge now. So CBGBs it was like an illegal amount of people in, and about 30 feet from the stage was a ladder up to like a crow's nest for the lighting guy. And so I had a trick that I do, and I said, Paul, I said, climb the ladder. I'm right behind you. So Paul climbs up the ladder. I climb up the ladder right behind him. So the two of us are above everybody, and we have the stage right in front of us. And the Ramones come out, and there's no way to overstate it. They blasted. They had Marshall stacks in CBGBs, which is ridiculous overkill. They
And
were
pegs and yeah,
they,
yeah.
they were fucking loud, and they were by now they had done like 100 gigs, so they were really tight. And Joey really had his stage presence down. And at the end of the second song, Paul looked down at me because we're on the he's above me on the ladder. He goes, "Oh my god, I fucking love them!" It's like,
That's brilliant.
I said, "I told you."